Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic is about assessing learners' performance. But first, what is assessment? Assessment, it is a method or tools na ginagamit ng teacher to evaluate and measure and document the academic readiness and learning process. Sinasabi na assessment plays an important role daw in the process of learning and motivation. Bakit? Because assessment is the process of gathering information about sa kung ano ang nalalaman ng mga estudyante at kung ano ang mga natutunan in relation to the learning outcomes. We have two general forms of assessment. First is summative assessment and the second one is formative assessment. Ano nga ba yung tinatawag na summative assessment? Ito ay ini-implement at the end of the course of the study, for example, via comprehensive final exams or papers. At the end of the school year, nagkakaroon ng test na binibigay sa atin yung mga teachers natin para malaman kung may mga natutunan ba tayo about sa mga naituro nila. And formative assessment naman involves the evaluation of student learning and intermediate points before any summative form. It is a method of ongoing assessment. Kunyari, habang nagdi-discuss yung teacher, ongoing in-class discussion. Ganun. Let us proceed to what do we mean by assessing learners' performance. This means that learning must be assessed through performance, what student can do with their learning. Here are some suggestions and strategies for assessing student learning and performance. First is creating assignments. Consider your learning objectives, of course, and what do you want, kung ano ba yung gusto mo matutunan ng mga estudyante mo sa course or subject na to. And after that, design assignments that are interesting and challenging. And the last one is creating exams. Choose appropriate items for your objectives and highlight how the exam aligns with course objectives. What is the purpose of assessing student performance? Ano daw ba ang purpose? Actually, there are so many reasons. The purpose of assessment is to gather relevant information about student performance or progress, or to determine student interest to make judgment about their learning process. It also helps teacher understand what went wrong if the grade of their students if they got a low grade. It helps the teacher plan her lesson plans effectively. It works as roadmap to let the teacher know if all the objectives set out of the beginning of the lessons have met or not.
What is the purpose of different type of assessment? Different type of assessments can help you understand the student's progress in various ways. Aside from helping the teachers plan and provide an effective target instruction in the academic content standards, teachers can tailor instruction directly to individual student needs. By using a variety of assessments, we can accommodate to all different students' learning styles and give them the opportunity for choice. This will make learning more exciting for students and help them to better understand the material being taught. In your classroom, assessments generally have one of three purposes. First is the assessment of learning, second is the assessment for learning, and third is the assessment as learning. Assessment of learning are usually grade-based and can include exams, portfolios, final projects, and standardized tests. Assessment of learning assists teachers in using evidence of student learning to assess achievement against outcomes and students. It is also referred to as summative assessment. It usually occurs at defined key points during a unit of work or at the end of a unit, term or semester, and may be used to rank or grade students. The effectiveness of assessment of learning for grading or ranking depends on the validity and reliability of activities. Its effectiveness as an opportunity for learning depends on the nature and quality of the feedback. The functions of assessment of learning are to find the achievements of students for promotion and placement, use to plan future learning goals and pathways for students, provide evidence of achievement to the wider community including parents, educators, the students themselves and outside groups, and also to provide a transparent interpretation across all audiences.
Assessment for learning. Assessment for learning provide you with a clear snapshot of student learning and understanding as you teach, allowing you to adjust everything from your classroom management strategies to your lesson plan as you go. Assessment for learning is ongoing assessment that allows teachers to monitor students on a day-to-day basis and modify their teaching based on what the students need to be successful. Assessment for learning should be always ongoing and actionable. This assessment provides students with the timely specific feedback that they need to make adjustment for their learning. Assessment is a key component of learning because it helps students learn. When students are able to see how they are doing in class, they are able to determine whether they do understand the course materials. Assessment can also help motivate students. Assessment as learning. Assessment as learning actively involves students in the learning process. It teaches critical thinking skills, problem solving, and encourages students to set achievable goals for themselves and objectively measure their progress. Assessment as learning occurs when students reflect on and monitor their progress to inform their future learning goals. Assessment is an integral part of instruction as it determines whether or not the goals of education are being met. Assessment affects decisions about grades, placement, advancement, instructional needs, curriculum, and in some cases, funding. Just remember, these assessments are not only for students. They provide us as a future teacher with actionable feedback to improve our instructions.
Diagnostic assessment. When you structure diagnostic assessments around your lesson, you'll get the information you need to understand student knowledge and engage your whole classroom. Diagnostic assessments can also help benchmark student progress. Consider giving the same assessment at the end of the unit so the student can see how they've come. Formative assessment. It helps teachers understand student learning while they teach and provide them with information to adjust their teaching strategies accordingly. Formative assessments help you track how student knowledge is growing and changing in your classroom in real time.
Summative assessment. It measures student progress as an assessment of learning. Standardized tests are a type of summative assessment and provide data for you, school leaders and district leaders. It is also a process of assessing the student knowledge, proficiency, and performance by comparing what they know with what they should have learned. Summative assessment are open high stakes, which means that they have a high point value. Ipsative assessment. Ipsative assessment are one of the types of measurement as learning that compares previous result with a second try, motivating students to set goals and improve their skills. An ipsative assessment compares a learner's current performance with previous performance either in the same field, through time, or in the comparison with other fields, resulting in a descriptor expressed in terms of their personal best. You can incorporate ipsative assessment into your classroom with portfolios, a two-stage testing process, and a project-based activities.
reference assessments. It is a test designed to compare an individual to a group of their peers, usually based on national standards and occasionally adjusted for age, ethnicity, or other demographics. Unlike impositive assessment, where the student is only competing against themselves, non-reference assessments draw from a wide range of data points to make a conclusion about student achievements. Like I said earlier, norm reference assessments are used when the goal is to rank test takers in a relationship of their peers. Another benefit in norm reference assessments is that it makes up for errors in test development. Results are not compromised if a test is too easy or too hard, because testers are being compared to others and not merely to the testing tool. Here are the types of norm reference assessment include IQ tests, physical assessment, standardized college admission tests like the SAT and GRE. For example, Aileen wants to know if her curriculum will help students learn math skills, and she written a math test for the student to take. But how should she determine what passing means? Okay, let me explain. A norm reference test scores a test by comparing a person's performance to another who are similar. You can remember norm reference by thinking the word normal. The object of a norm reference test is to compare person performance to what is normal of for another people like her or him. Think of it kind of like a race. If a runner comes in third in a race, that doesn't mean tell us anything objectively about what the runner did. We don't know if she finished in 30 seconds or 30 minutes. We only know that she finished after two other runners and ahead of everyone else. So if Ricky decided to make her test norm reference, she would compare students to what is normal for that age, grade, or class. Another example of the reference test is include that SAT or SAT and IQ test, and a test that are graded on a curve. Anytime a test offers percentile rank, it is a norm reference test. If you score at the 80th percentile, that means that you are scored better than 80% of people in your group. Norm reference tests are a good way to compensate for any mistake that might be in designing the measurement rules. For example, what if Ricky math test is too easy and everybody is it? If this is a norm reference test, that's okay because you are not looking at the actual scores of the students, but how will they did in relation to the students in the same age group, grade, or class. Now let's proceed to the number 6. Criterion reference assessment. Criterion reference assessments compare the score of an individual student to a learning standard and performance level, independent of other students around them. Criterion reference assessments are most often compared with the norm reference assessment. Criterion reference tests measure the number of correct responses based on a specific, often minimum of criterion of what is expected to pass the exam. The criteria is what determine acceptable achievement or mastery of skills. A criterion reference test score may be expressed in a percentage correct out of the total. Criterion reference tests measured individual performance to determine mastery of content or whether or not they mastered the specific skills. And the following examples of criterion reference test is the driver education test, end of unit exam, pass and fail semester exam. The two types of tests each serve different purposes, and the scores are used differently. Schools and teachers may use norm reference test scores to rank student achievement across board areas of knowledge. Another example of norm reference score is a growth chart. Just as test scores, growth points are ranked in comparison to others in the same age group. On the contrary, criterion reference scores may be used to determine if a student has mastered specific skills or concepts in specific areas of study. For example, like I said earlier, the example is the driver education exam. Illustrate this concept. Test takers are not ranked by performance on their driver education exam. Instead, they either pass or fail depending if they meet the present criteria. Remember the difference between norm reference assessment and criterion reference assessment. Tests based on norms measure the performance of a group of test takers against the performance of another group of test takers. This type of assessment result can be used to compare the performance of 7th graders in a particular school system to another performance of a border and perhaps more diverse. Criterion-based tests measure the performance of test takers relative to particular criteria covered in the curriculum. In other words, criterion reference assessment test scores can be used to determine if the test takers has met the program objectives. That's all for today. Thank you for your listening.